Paddles. Some swimmers hate them, some swimmers love them, and most triathletes love them as well. But what do they do for your swimming? Why should you use them and when? Well, if you haven't yet guessed it, today's video is all about paddles. Well, these are swim paddles and they come in all different colours, different sizes and even different shapes. And you might well have noticed other swimmers using them at the pool, but no, you can't use them in racing. So what are they all about? Are you missing a trick by not using them? Well, before we delve into those answers, I just want to quickly remind you that you can make sure you get all of our videos and you don't miss a single one by clicking that subscribe button. Paddles are what we call a training aid. They're used by swimmers in training to help you actually perform better on race day. And they work on two aspects of your stroke. They help you develop your strength, but also your technique. Now, as a result, they're going to be working obviously mainly your upper body, so your arms and your shoulders. And because of that, swimmers quite often use them along with a pull buoy, which will not only eliminate any leg kick, it also helps put your body in the optimum swimming position. Equally though, they can be used purely alone when you're just doing normal swim stroke. Well, first let's look at how paddles actually help you develop that strength. Well, if you think about it, trying to move this large object through the water is naturally going to be much harder than trying to move your small hand through the water. And you can almost think of it as though you're riding your bike in the hardest gear. That's obviously going to make your legs move much slower and feel more resistance, be harder for every pedal stroke. Well, paddles have the same effect in the water. By adding to the surface area of your hand, paddles increase the amount of water you are pulling and then the resistance that you will feel. And much like a gym session, if you do this repeatedly, you will build up the strength to do it better. So when you take off the paddles, pulling just your hand through the water feels effortless. Resistance work, though, does need to come with some warnings. I don't want you to just hear about paddles and go and buy a new pair, jump in the pool and do all of your swimming with them, because your body needs time to adjust and get stronger. So make sure you just start using them for small parts of your session and you build it up nice and gradually. Now, just like lifting weights in the gym, the bigger, the harder when it comes to paddles. So start off with a smaller paddle, one that's not much bigger than your palm, so you can just start to get used to it and your muscles can adapt. If you go in and start using dinner plate size paddles, I'm afraid you're going to end up with some sort of shoulder injury. And also, like resistance training in the gym, technique is important when you're trying to work on strength. So you want to make sure that you've got that technique right and dialed in so that you can then add the strength and the resistance to that. Well, that brings us on to the next point. How do paddles help with your technique? Well, they exaggerate every part of your stroke, the good parts and the bad parts. But basically, you're still going to be able to swim at the same speed whilst moving your arms much slower. So you can really focus on every aspect. You can really concentrate on the pull, the catch, the exit, and the recovery. And when you get the stroke right and you're using paddles, you can really feel that power of the water as your body moves over it. Equally, if you get it a bit wrong, you really notice that as well. So if you've got any technique issues, it will highlight them. For example, if your hand at entry goes slightly wayward, your paddle will almost pull your hand further wayward, and you can even start to feel you might struggle to swim in a straighter line because the different parts of your stroke where you're moving your hand will pull you slightly off center. And similarly, at the final part of the pull, that push phase, you can really feel when you get that right and you'll just get that acceleration and it'll help you to extend the full part of your pull. So now you know the why, it's time to look at when you use paddles. Well, as we've already said, use them minimally to start with and build up gradually. You don't want to be using your paddles for more than a third of your session so that you're not becoming too reliant on them. Because like we said earlier, you can't use them in the race and they're not cheap for just going faster when you're feeling a bit tired. They're there to help improve your strokes. You want to have a structure and a reason for when you do actually choose to use them. And then think of a session or a set within that session that you can use them in. Say, for example, something like 850s with a rest in between, and you can either build that up in the distance or the number of the reps. And a really important rule, never warm up with your paddles, because just like any resistance training, if you're going to the gym, you're going to do a warm up first. So make sure you do your normal warm up, just swimming usually, and then you add in your paddles once your arms and shoulders are nice and warm. Well, once you're comfortable using them, there's nothing to say you can't use your paddles for almost every session, but just make sure that you've got a purpose and a reason, you know why you're using them. Like we said, not just putting them on to make it easier. And it's worth noting that as much as paddles feel great, the opposite happens when you take them off, and your hands can feel really tiny and it feels quite hard to get the feeling of the water. So if you've got a key set coming up, it's probably not a good idea to use your paddles beforehand, because then you're going to struggle to feel and get into that session. But again, you can use them once you've done that hard effort as part of a technique aspect afterwards, or adding in that strength aspect. And alternatively, you could use them if you've got, say, a nice chunky aerobic set, like 3 500s, and you just want to feel a little bit better on that final one. You can pop your paddles on for that final 500. And before we finish, I think it's just worth addressing the fact that hopefully if you've got any shoulder niggles or issues, then you know not to go and use paddles, because they are going to, like we say, exacerbate anything around this area. So make sure you're nice and healthy and you've had that good warm up, and you do build them up slowly. But there's a lot of advantage to be had from paddles. So go and experiment, see if you can borrow a friend's, try out different ones, and certain paddles, certain shapes will suit some swimmers more than others. So yeah, good luck with your paddle journey. Let us know what type of paddles you use and when you use them in your sessions. Hopefully it's given you some inspo, and if you've enjoyed it, do hit that like button, and like we said earlier, click on the bell icon to subscribe.